Sometimes the people we rescue are the ones sent to rescue us. He was a single dad with a quiet routine, a sleepy dog, and a son who still believed mornings should start with pancakes. She was a teenager, barefoot and pregnant, shivering on the side of a dusty rural road, claiming her name was Lila. But names can be borrowed, and sometimes the truth waits in silence, crouched between fear and forgiveness. Before we go deeper into the story, remember, if you believe in stories that restore faith in humanity, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The morning was a soft gray, the kind that hinted at rain but never quite delivered. Elijah Reed rose early, the way men who've had their hearts broken tend to, before the ache wakes up fully. His small farm on the outskirts of Norbridge wasn't much to look at. Paint peeled in spots, and the porch sagged slightly on one side. But it was honest. So was he. After losing his wife 3 years ago, Elijah poured every quiet breath into raising his 8-year-old son, Jonah, and tending the land. The dog, Rufus, a shaggy-eared mutt with an attitude, was his only backup. They weren't rich. Some weeks, they weren't even sure about groceries. But Jonah had never gone to bed hungry, and Elijah made sure their home was stitched together with safety and laughter, even if the stitches sometimes showed. That morning, Elijah was returning from town with seed packets and a worn box of cereal when he spotted her. Just beyond the bend where the trees leaned in like eavesdropping neighbors, a figure sat on a broken fence rail. Her hair was tangled, one arm curled protectively around her belly, and her sneakers were frayed nearly to the sole. Elijah slowed the truck. Something about the way she didn't flinch, didn't even look up, settled heavy in his chest. He pulled over. She gave a name that didn't match her eyes. Said she was 18. Said she was heading to a friend's place 2 towns over. Said a lot of things fast, as if words could outrun judgment. Elijah, a man who'd learned not to push people who were barely holding on, just nodded and offered a ride. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He just pointed toward the Warren farmhouse and said, "It's warm. Got food. If you need a place to land for a while." She said her name again, Lila, this time quieter, more like a hope than a truth. Jonah was curious but polite. He asked if the baby was a boy or a girl. Lila smiled with the hesitation of someone who hadn't smiled in weeks. They said girl, but she didn't seem certain. Elijah noticed. The first few days were quiet. Lila kept to herself, folded towels that didn't need folding, watched the rain streak down the kitchen window. Elijah gave her space. He didn't ask what she was running from, but the bruises beneath the makeup, the way she flinched at sudden noises, told stories louder than her silence. Jonah was the one who got through first. With a shared bowl of popcorn and a blanket fort in the living room, he coaxed laughter from her. Real laughter, the kind that surprises even the one making it. Weeks passed. The trees outside began to bud with early spring. The orchard just beginning to believe in warmth again. So did Lila. Her walk steadied. Her eyes lingered on Jonah, like she was memorizing what kindness looked like. She started humming while washing dishes. Soft, tuneless, but alive. But Elijah knew better than to mistake healing for safety. One night, he came home late from the feed store and saw a black SUV idling at the edge of the road. Too new, too polished, too out of place in Norbridge. When he approached, it pulled away without headlights. The next morning, Lila was pale and withdrawn. She didn't speak at breakfast. When Jonah asked about the fort, she said maybe later. Elijah didn't press, but the ache in his gut bloomed sharp. That night, Rufus barked so hard his voice cracked. Elijah stepped out with flashlight and found tire tracks in the dirt, fresh, deep, leading nowhere. He changed the locks the next morning. Lila apologized without saying sorry. She baked banana bread and cleaned the barn-side shed, even though Elijah hadn't used it in months. He watched her from the porch, coffee in hand, wondering who was really being protected here. 2 nights later, the truth came at 3:14 a.m. A hard knock at the door, followed by 2 men in suits that didn't belong on dirt roads. They flashed a badge, not a real one, but close enough to intimidate, said they were private security. Asked about a girl, 17, pregnant, missing from a hospital in Lexington. Claimed she was unstable, needed supervision. Elijah stood in the doorway, wide enough to block their view. Said he hadn't seen anyone. They left a card. Said to call if he remembered anything. When the sun rose, Lila stood in the doorway, hair tangled, face bare, trembling like a deer too tired to run. She told the real story. Her name wasn't Lila. It was Natalie Whitmore, daughter of Christopher Whitmore, the billionaire who built half the malls east of the Mississippi. The pregnancy was real. So was the pressure to disappear quietly. She ran because she didn't want her child raised in a golden cage. She ran because her father saw her as an investment. She ran because she wanted to feel real air, not filtered penthouse drafts. She ran to save something purer. Elijah didn't speak right away. He poured her a cup of tea, the way his wife used to when he got overwhelmed. Then he sat across from her and nodded. Sometimes truth just needs a place to rest. The days after were slow, deliberate. They made plans. Not big ones, just enough. Elijah quietly contacted an old friend in town who still knew folks in family law. No names, just questions. Jonah started drawing pictures of the baby. Always a girl, always with a smile. One afternoon, Natalie helped Elijah repair the barn door. She stood beside him in overalls 2 sizes too big, holding nails like precious stones. The sun hit her hair just right, and for a moment, she looked less like a lost girl and more like a young mother, strong and still becoming. Then the black SUV returned. This time it didn't idle. It came up the drive. Natalie froze. Elijah stepped forward, hammer still in hand. Rufus growled low and dangerous. A man stepped out, not a bodyguard, not a stranger. Christopher Whitmore. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He smiled, told Natalie she'd had her adventure. Now it was time to come home. Told Elijah he appreciated the hospitality. Told them both that this farm life, the charade, wasn't real. Then he looked at Jonah and asked if he missed having a proper house. That's when Natalie stood up, shoulders back, voice steady. Said she wasn't property. Said she'd choose her child's future, even if it meant courtrooms and headlines. Christopher blinked like he hadn't anticipated steel in her spine. He left without another word. The next week was chaos. Papers served. Lawyers called. A local reporter sniffed a rumor and camped outside the bakery in town. But something had changed. Natalie didn't shrink anymore. Elijah built a crib. Jonah painted stars on the ceiling of the nursery. And when Natalie went into labor on a rainy Tuesday, she clutched Elijah's hand and whispered only one thing: "Thank you." The baby was born under thunder and candlelight. A girl, just like Jonah had drawn. Tiny, furious, perfect. They named her Grace. 2 weeks later, the court ruling came. Natalie was granted full custody. Christopher disappeared into silence, his empire shaken but intact. And Elijah, once just a quiet man with a broken porch, found his home full again. Jonah became a big brother. Natalie stayed, not as a guest. As family, they planted wildflowers along the edge of the driveway that spring. Grace learned to coo in rhythm with Rufus's snoring. And on warm evenings, they sat on the porch, 3 chairs close together, watching the stars blink on. Because sometimes the people we think we're saving are the ones who help us begin again. If this story reached you, if it made you pause and feel, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We have more stories coming that remind us all it's not about how we fall. It's about who helps us rise. Until next time, take gentle care of your heart.